Supplemental math videos from Circle Christian School.
Notes on taking notes. Effective notes. The art of taking and studying notes is more than just simply copying information down as a teacher lectures or puts things on the board. It is actually learning the great art of paying attention. The art of taking and studying notes is more simple than just writing down the information as a teacher lectures. It is more about learning the art of paying attention and really trying to understand what your teacher is teaching. So one of the most simplest type of notes to take are actually math notes, because the teacher is basically giving you information, showing you information, telling you how to use the information, and it's all about a process anyway. So before making any type of note, what you have to do is develop a purpose. That is, why should I take notes? Well, studies have shown that students that take notes actually have a 75% more success rate than students who do not take notes. Well, the reason why is because actually there are three senses that are being incorporated into note taking. Taking notes or learning any type of thing is about bringing it into your brain, following a little path, putting it into a little nook and cranny file, and hopefully being able to pull it back out. The more you travel that path back to the place where the information is being stored, the more it is easier for the electrons to follow that path, pull the information out, and use it. I like equating it to the Old West wagon trains. When the wagon trains first started, there wasn't a path. But the more and more trains that started to go out west, a groove started to grow along their path here. And that groove was what the others used to follow. When we take notes, first what we do is get the information to begin with. That is, we hear it. It is given to us. And that information follows a little path and gets placed someplace in a nook and cranny of your brain. Now, the see-touch parts of taking notes, because that's what it is. Taking notes is really kind of the see and touch. Allow the information touching. We're going to use a nice little pencil here. We're touching it. We're making words. We're putting colors to it. All those kind of things. Allow the same bit of information to find its way back to that little nook and cranny. And, of course, we get to see what is being said. And again, it's being put along a path there. When we study it, we're now going to bring it back out. And again, that path just gets more and more and more worn. The more you travel the path, the easier it is to follow and use. That's why we take notes. Actually, there is a way to get your note-taking in a Head Start way, and we call that priming your brain. And ironically, the best thing to do to prime your brain for class or for some sort of lecture is to read about the topic in your textbook before you start class. It may seem silly, but the more you do in advance, the better off you are. And math textbooks are probably one of the greatest books for being able to do that, because inside of every homework that you're ever going to get, there is a thing called the lesson forward. Now, the lesson forward generally gives you some nice vocabulary, shows you some process, colorful ways of how you're going to do something. And most of the time, your teacher is actually doing problems that are inside a lesson forward. If you take a look at that beforehand, you've got to jump on what you're going to be taking notes. In fact, it's not a bad idea to start your note-taking before you even get to class. With some of our classes, we actually have videos that you should watch before you even get to go see it there. You can take notes there and then just reaffirm and add to your notes as the teacher lectures. Remember, what we're doing is working on success here. We're also trying to save time. The more you do before, the less you have to do after. So it may seem silly, but prime your brain. Read the textbook. 5, maybe 10 minutes. Glance at the pictures, see what the teacher's doing, and worst case scenario, while the teacher is teaching, make sure you've got the book open to that lesson board that the teacher is actually teaching from. In addition to priming your brain, there's some more helpful tips that you can use for taking notes, and I'm going to give that to you on the next couple of pages here. The first thing you're going to do is basically what we're going to do is take notes on taking notes. And because what you're doing is taking notes, I am a firm believer that it is very good to tag things out, because that way you've got some place to go back to readily to go and study it when it's time to study things. My favorite is to always start with a little post-it note. My note page will have my name up on top of it. I'll have my little tabby, the concept that we're talking about, and in this case, the concept is taking notes. So I'm just going to pretty much write taking notes. That way I've got something to look at. Hey, that's what this is all about. And on the little tabby, I'll put some sort of symbol, some sort of picture, something that allows me to go back and quickly find it. Worst case scenario again on this is you can just put the date, because you remember, hey, it was something I did at the first of the year, the middle of the year, and at the end of the year. Now, setting a page up just kind of depends. The first thing is that you should date every page. So right below everything, you're going to put the date. Today's date is July 5th, 2016. That allows you to be able to go back and just keep things rather chronologically, or if maybe because it's a spiral notebook, the page fell out, you got a place to put it back in. So make sure that you date every page. The next suggestion is always leave about a third of the page empty. Now you can either leave it empty on the left-hand side or the right-hand side. Depends on what's easier for you. Left-handed people may want to leave the right-hand side empty. In fact, lefties, I encourage you to actually find spiral notebooks that actually work backwards. They, in fact, I think you should honestly set your 3-ring binder up backwards so that you're not always having to write over the spirals or your rings anytime that you're using it. So leave a third of the page empty, because you're going to put your information, or what's being presented here, but you're going to be able to add great things over on the side. Maybe it's questions. Why 1/3? Or this is important maybe. Or you can also use it to make any kind of nice little picture. Like so. And it just allows you to be able to put information. At a real quick glance, you can take a look and go, hey, this is something I should have, or this is what I'm actually talking about over on the other side. In a moment, I'll give you an example of doing this with an actual math lesson. You should also take notes anytime when a teacher says, this will be on a test. Another thing would be, this is important. Teacher goes, this is important. Teacher might say, this is not in your book. I'm sure you can think of a few more that are very good things that you should be, anytime a teacher says something, you go, oh, I should write that down. In my class, you should write it down when I say, this is a good whittle. That is my code word for you to totally write this down. My next suggestion is that after you've taken notes on the front page as you move along here, is to flip the page and keep the back page empty for any additional information. It might be something like pictures that you can either add later, or maybe you just want to organize certain pictures, word problems, etc., that the teacher shows you on the board, and that allows you to be able to put it there. For instance, math students who take notes, a certain type of graph, you want to copy it down, or you want to add to it a little bit later, or maybe you share your notes with your friends. I always suggest that it's great to get together with a few study buddies before you do your homework. As a matter of fact, one thing you should do is actually go over your notes before you do any homework, but compare notes with your study buddy and see what they got out of the information that the teacher gave. They may have something that you don't, or you might have something that they have. All in all, try to make note taking kind of fun. Try not to cram everything all onto one page. If you're worried about killing a few trees, don't worry about it. Buy the recycled paper notebook, spiral notebooks that are out there. But truth is, it's not wasted at any time here, because you're actually using it and getting something from it. So again, make sure things aren't crammed. Work a little bit on organizing. Leave that 1/3 page so you can add things. And the back page is for any time you find something that is after the fact and you still need to add to it. Let's do a practice math session. This is going to be all about fractions. So I've got my page in my little notebook here. Got my name at the top, got the date. I'm going to put my little post-it note here. I am going to add the concept here. In my class, I always have the concept ready for you and what the little symbol is. And so we're talking about fractions, so you would put that at the top of your page here. My little symbol, I'll give you the little symbol always, and it's going to look a little bit like algebra, but A over B. And again, you're going to leave a little bit of space off on the side here so that you can work. And as the teacher's working, you're going to start to add things. So up on the board, I have written adding fractions, and you're going to kind of copy it down. Again, math is the easiest thing to take notes of, because generally what you're doing is the same thing that the teacher is. My suggestion, though, is not to just copy. You're doing more in that. Learn from it. Try to work the problem as the teacher's doing it without looking at what the teacher's doing. See if you get the same answer that they get. As a matter of fact, try to race them a little bit, anticipate what they're trying to do, and race them to see if you get the answer before they do. It's always kind of like a fun little thing to do. And again, isn't it nice to make notes fun? So what we're going to do is add fractions here. And as the teacher goes through the lesson, she says something about, well, what do we need to add fractions? Well, we need a common denominator. A common denom. Now the teacher's kind of fun in this, and she kind of tells you a little bit of how she doesn't like denominators. In fact, she does a little play on the letters of denominator and totally switches it up to being this mean old demon. And again, here I've made my notes a little bit fun. Got the double going on here. Yes. Yeah. Little demons. Fraction demons. We need a common denominator. That common denominator, the teacher said, is called the least common denominator. That means that the guys down on the bottom here have to have a number that they both share, a least common number that they count by. Now, it's always kind of funny when you do a least common denominator, what you're doing is actually looking for the greatest number that two things could be. So what we have here is 3/5 plus 1/4, 5 and 4 being the denominators. We're going to have to find a common denominator between 5 and 4. Least common denominator says I need to count by fives, which is kind of, you start thinking, well, that's the big number. Well, least common denominator says always start with the biggest number. And I'm going to start by fives, count by fives till I get something that that can also be divided by 4. So you go 5, 10, 15, 20, 20. Yes, 20 can be divided by 4. It's the first one we come to. And we're just going to rewrite. We're going to make equivalent equations. That means that they have the same value. It's just cut up into more little denominator pieces of the pizza pie here. And now what we have to do is make them equivalent. Well, what did it take for the 5 to get to a 20? Well, it took a 4. So now I need to multiply the 4 to both the 3 and the 5. And we get a 12. What did it take for the 4 to get to the 20? Well, it took a 5. So we have to multiply the top and the bottom by the 5. Whatever you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom. And now we can add them together because we have a common denominator. In algebra, what we do is put the common denominator down below, and then we take our numerator numbers and do the math. So I have 12 plus 5. And that equals 17 over 20. All right, now, in that, me as a teacher had written things along the board, but I had said things that had not been written down. This is where you sometimes have to add things that maybe you did not know. For instance, maybe you did not know that the common denominator here, the least common denominator, is always going to start with the big number. And so you may add things like big number as you're writing things down. Another thing that you might not have known is, oh, we have to do the math part, the numerator part up top. We're going to put those together. Very possibly you'd forgotten that the top part's called a numerator, and you might write that down. All right, now the teacher has gotten to the end and has told you that it's 17/20, and she's going to ask the big question here. Well, what do we do with all fractions when we get done? And you, as the smart algebra student, remembers that she has said somewhere before, all fractions must be reduced or they are wrong. So you give yourself a nice little reminder that you must reduce, or at least check to reduce. And so we've got 17 and 20. That means we're going to have to find our greatest common factor. But we have actually a clue here, and the clue is that we have a prime number. Ooh, prime. Listen to the math. So I'm going to add that this is prime. And if this is prime, I know it is good to go. Got a prime number either in the numerator or the denominator, you cannot make that fraction any smaller. So those are just nice little things that you can add. Multiplying fractions. Multiplying fractions could be done in several different ways. I'm just going to go with the most basic fact, and the most basic fact is that we have to multiply the numerators, and we have to multiply the denominators together. I'm going to call them demons again because that's just kind of a fun thing to do. That means we have to multiply across the top and we have to multiply across the bottom and then check to see if something doesn't need reducing. So we end up with 12 over, 8 times 9 is 72. Carry the 7 up over here, gives us 162. All right. Now, my teacher said to look for prime numbers to see if maybe we don't have to reduce. And I don't see any prime numbers. I see even numbers. And I remember that one time my teacher said if I have an even on top and an even down below, I know I have to reduce this. And I can always start with something nice, simple, and that's I can always divide by a 2 to make something smaller, which is going to give us 6 over 81. Now, offhand, I look at this and go, well, okay, 681. Now, those are factors. I remember seeing them in my multiplication facts, so I know I still need to go just a little bit further here. And one way is to actually take our numbers here that are in our fractions up in the numerator and the denominator and take them down to little prime numbers. Well, 2 times 3 are prime numbers for 6. And with 81, I know it's 9 times 9. It's one of those doubles numbers that we get when we roll doubles and multiply them together on the Monopoly board. So 9 and 9, well, that's 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, just taking it down to prime numbers. And we know when we have a prime number over a prime number, they cancel out because they just make 1. Oh, there's my final answer, 2 over 27. Now, that's one way that just practices a lot of different types of multiplication. But then the teacher reminds you, hey, we can do that canceling thing. And again, remember, I've got a little bit of paper sitting over on the side here that's blank so that I can just make special notations. I can cancel, but canceling has to be always somehow top to bottom. Never side to side. All right, I can do things like, all right, 2 can go into the 18, and that leaves me with a 9. And again, I can't cancel out the 9 and the 9s here because that's side to side. It has to be something on top to something down below. Let's see, I have 6 and 9. We can take a 3 out of both of those, and that's going to leave me with a 2 and a 3. And when we get all done, and we've got nothing but prime numbers, I'm just going to put a little 1 over here just to remind me. And I'm going to circle my all dones here just so I can see it a little bit better. That is kind of the inherent tough thing about canceling, is you got to make sure you don't get lost in top to bottom and getting rid of this and changing that and so forth and so on. And maybe we got to take one of the changes and, take something out of it. Problem, instead of just going ahead across the top and then taking things down to their prime to go and finish it. And so now I can go across the top here. We have 2 and 1. Just a nice double check. 3 and 9, 27. Very good. I've done it 2 different ways and have the same answer. Now remember we had that little back page here? When you got all done, your teacher said, hey, can I show you just a really neat little trick? And y'all said, sure, but you used your whole page up here, but yet this has something to do with the fractions that she just worked with. And she says, I'm going to show you just this really cool trick that happens with adding fractions. And so you flip it over because you got this back page that you've left empty. And I'm going to write at the top of the back black page, neat, I want neat trick. Hold on a sec. Here's my whiteout. Neat trick. She says, I saw this once on YouTube and just thought it was absolutely fascinating that you could do this to add 2 fractions together. That what you do is you take one of the denominators here, like so, and you just multiply it to the top here. Okay, so that's going to give you 5. And you take the other denominator here and you multiply it to the top, which is going to be 12. And then you take the two numbers here and multiply those together, and you get your 20. Now you're going to take your math that you had up top here and put it on top. And you get 17 over 20. And she shows you several of these different problems, and you've now been able to add that to the back because she did a couple of them and went, hey, I'm going to show you this neat little trick I saw at the very end of all your note taking. And so that is a great reason why you leave a nice blank page on the back, because sometimes there's things to add that are relevant to what you did on the front page instead of at the end and having to flip through a whole bunch of pages. Notice that something else that I did here as I was working was I used a lot of different colors to accentuate different things. I am totally famous for my Bic 4-color clicky pen. I write in pen and not pencil. However, if your math teacher asks you to write in pencil, please write in pencil. But have things like maybe colored pencils around to do things, or little highlighters so that you can do this with your notes. Remember, notes are for you. You have to make them work for you. You have to be able to go back and look at them. Nobody else really should be able to decipher your notes, because remember, they did not hear what you heard. They did not see that initial path. They see some visual things happening, but they did not have the touch for what happened. They just have a visual picture of what you did. You have done 3 different things here. You've heard something from the teacher. You have touched it with your pencil or your colored pens, and you have made it visual, and now have gelled together 3 different things to make these notes totally work for you. Now the important thing, studying notes. Once you've got them written down, you've got to do something with them. Now for some people, yeah, maybe it's just enough that, hey, I have visualized, touched, and saw these. But for the successful person, they want to go back and take a look at it. 5-10 minutes, tops. But here's the key things for studying your notes. Number 1, review all notes within 24 hours. Again, I'm talking 5-10 minutes. And in this case, with math, what you need to do is actually just glance over what you did to begin with and start your homework on the next page. Take that 5-10 minutes, because what it will do is keep you from having to spend 25 minutes while you're doing your homework going back and looking up what you had totally forgotten. Number 2, record any information or visuals that you remember but didn't have time for. Great use of that back page. Highlight items that you have questions, or maybe you don't simply understand, and those are the things that you can ask the teacher on your next class day. 3, create your own questions, be the teacher, make a test. You can also think of potential exam questions that could be developed from the information of your notes. And 4, a great way for reviewing notes is by reading them out loud. If you're the kind of person who doesn't sit still and you're very auditory, you like listening, I'm also going to suggest that while you read them out loud, you walk at the same time too. You would be surprised that walking and reading out is going to make such a difference in studying and prepping you up for your practice and your homework. Many students don't understand what it means to study for a math test. Studying kind of conjures up these images of reading and memorizing a whole lot of notes and formulas and things that just aren't really very practical for math. While there are occasional notes taken in math class, a lot of your math notes will actually come from your math homework. Another great reason for that blank page, that as you do your homework, you might remember something that is, oh, I should put that in my notes, accentuate it. And that back page will help you keep it organized with maybe the same thing that the teacher taught at the same time. Studying for a math test doesn't mean just studying math vocabulary, but it's doing your homework regularly, paying attention to the corrections that made in class, learning from your mistakes, and then practice, practice, practice. Since studying for math tests begins with doing homework, I'm going to suggest to you that you make sure you take a look at the next video that shows you how to set up things like your math note page and your math homework page. That is very beneficial for you to help be organized and very successful, and again, save you time. The more you do up front, the more you do it at the time that you're doing it, instead of having to go back and try to put it all back together, you actually save your time to be able to do fun things that you really want to go do. What did you learn? Babu, babu, boo. I love VeggieTales, so I have kind of stolen this from them. But my philosophy is that whether it's your math class, your English class, your Sunday school Bible class, always walk out that door knowing one more thing than you walked in, a wise whittle. At the end of all your homework, all your practice, all your notes, always include some sort of conclusion. What did you learn? This conclusion can basically be a summary of what you took away from the lesson. So today's What Did You Learn? I have for you extra credit, 100 wonderful, great little star points for including at the end of your notes from this video what you learned, your conclusion. Make it good, make it bold, be specific, tell me exactly what you learned. Don't say, hey, I learned how to take notes. Tell me what it is that is going to now help you take effective notes and be that successful math student. Thank you for listening. Have an awesome day. If you have any questions, remember to ask me because there are no answers to questions that are never asked.